Today we are diving into the world of wheelies, and this is what I looked like on day 6. Whoops. And this is what I look like on day 30. So why is it that I don't have what I look like on day 1? Well, I didn't think these videos were going to be important when I started filming them for shorts, and then I realized, oh, I am actually going through the process of learning a wheelie. By around day 6, I decided to start saving the videos because this would be great content for a wheelie tutorial. So here we are. As you can see, I have fully unlocked my wheelie by day 30. And that's exactly what this tutorial is about, giving you the information from a beginner's perspective on how to unlock your wheelie. Most of the tutorials out there tell you from the perspective of somebody who's been biking a long time or who has been doing wheelies a long time. And I think that they have forgotten all of the little motor skills that they learned along the way. And while I was learning my wheelie, I realized there's a bunch of little things that fall into place as you're going through the process of learning wheelie. So my wheelie tutorial is a little bit different. It's from a beginner's perspective instead of being from an advanced person's perspective, which should give everybody a little bit different view on wheelies and hopefully unlock your wheelies by day 30 like I did with mine. Hold up. This is not a full wheelie tutorial, so I'm not going to go over all the mechanics and all the components that it takes to learn a wheelie in the first place. But this is going to be the idea of a beginner learning how to wheelie, following all those tutorials and the gaps that I think that they forgot because they weren't beginners. Let's go. So how did I unlock my wheelie? I'm 43. I'd consider myself an intermediate mountain biker. I have a full-time job that is not YouTubing. And I've got a family with kids in all different types of sports. And I don't get to ride every day of the week. I get to ride one day of the week for maybe 3 hours. So how did I do it? I committed to practicing 30 days in a row. And I knew that I couldn't commit 30 days solid. So I decided to break up the 30 days one day a week. So one day a week for 30 weeks, I would practice 10 minutes, 10 concentrated minutes. Now that was something with my busy life that I could actually lay down. I had days that sucked. I had days that rocked, but every time that something sucked, I figured it out the next day because I was staying consistent. So you don't need to hammer straight through all 30 days. And as a matter of fact, I would suggest not doing that. But that's not the only thing that I'm going to talk about. So let's get into the facts of what I learned during those 30 days that's going to help you unlock your wheelie. Okay, here's one of the things that really made a difference for me. You have to find the right gear. And everybody tells you this across the board. Now, what nobody really seems to tell you is what specific gear. And that's because it's honestly hard. Depending on the grade of hill you're trying to wheelie on, it's going to affect how much torque you need to put into the rear wheel. So it depends on what gear. However, I think there's a general rule that if you go in the middle of your rear sprocket and you go up one or down one from that, you're going to be golden because I'm guessing that you're not trying to wheelie up a mountain just yet. I guarantee it's going to be right in one of those spots. Wow. I think I made it to day 15 before I realized I had my seat height all jacked up. Fortunately, somebody on YouTube was nice enough to comment and say,
"Dude, you should probably lift your seat because I think it's affecting your wheelie."
Fortunately, I'd been trying to wheelie with my seat slammed for like 15 days. So I learned how to control the bike when it was squirrely as hell because you change the angle by which you need to wheelie. And once I brought my seat height up, I realized, oh my gosh, the bike actually has way more control because you've expanded out that angle that you need to stay in for a wheelie. And it was mind-bending when I found this out, because the first 2 times I went up, I felt like I was way too high on the bike to wheelie. But when the bike got into the wheelie, it was a glorious wheelie. I was able to manage it, and it wasn't as squirrely as it was previously. So it made it a lot easier in the top of the wheelie. But don't put your seat height all the way to the top. That is a recipe for disaster, because going all the way to the top, it might be too far out the other direction. So I suggest being about 1 to 2 inches from your max ride height. And that is the sweet spot for learning to wheelie. Everybody told me over and over again, steer with your knees, steer with your knees. And try as I may to stick my knees out off the bike, and sometimes they were so far out that my toes were just barely holding onto the pedal anymore. I kept trying to figure out what they meant by steer with your knees, because no matter how hard I fought the bike with my knees, I still ended up veering off course. And it wouldn't come back until I was almost hitting the curb on the street. So I was like, people are able to steer a lot quicker than I am with their knees, and I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. Then on like day 25, for whatever reason, I put my hips into the saddle. Instead of just steering with the knees, I decided to tilt my hips into the saddle. And as soon as I did that, the bike instantaneously responded. And I was like, oh, that's it. You're steering with your hips. What actually happens is your knees go in or out depending on which way you tilt your hips. Some people, I think when they tilt their knees, they actually tilt their hips at the same time. For me, I move my knees sort of independently of my hips. The moment that I engaged my hips and pushed into the saddle from left to right, the bike instantly responded. So I would say play with your hips instead of your knees. One caveat, if your bike is going to the right, you've got to tilt your hips to the right also. It's going to throw your left knee out, and then the bike is actually going to correct itself. Way counterintuitive, but guaranteed, give it a try. Think about leaning your hips when you're in your wheelie. Don't think about throwing your knees out. Your knees will happen, but think about steering with your hips. I had a lot of advice to lock out my suspension or go to a completely suspensionless bike like a BMX or, even a dirt jumper, something that had less suspension. Well, those aren't options for me. I don't have a fleet of bikes. I most certainly don't have a light suspension bike. I have Fox 38s in the front, and I have it's an Ibis Ripmo. I have a ton of travel on my bike, and it's the only bike I have. I had to learn on it. In the 30 days, I learned with it as firm as it could be or as squish as it could be. And it does not matter today. And it never really mattered in the first place. If it's set right for your body weight, it probably won't affect you as badly as you think. The consistency of working for 30 days will overcome the problem with the squishy suspension. You will learn it. Set your suspension however you want to. You'll be fine. This is an interesting one for me. About day 10, I realized that I was really yanking on those handlebars. I was trying to pull that front wheel off the ground with all my might. On day 10, something magical happened where I could just pedal one stroke and then the bike would just right off the ground. It was insane. And I realized I was barely using my hands. Even in the top of the wheelie, I was barely using my hands. And it clicked that if I'm yanking on the handlebars to get that bike up, I'm not giving a good enough pedal stroke mixed with a good lean back on the bike. You want to lean back as you're giving that first pedal stroke. And if the front wheel doesn't just sort of roll back, you've probably done it wrong. And you've got to find the sweet spot of the amount of power to put down versus the amount of weight to lean back. When you get it right, it feels smooth and beautiful. If you get it wrong, you end up yanking the handlebars and it completely destroys anything that you were working for. Think about pedal stroke and leaning back, and it should come up smooth. If you're yanking, give it another shot to get that pedal stroke in the right timing with you leaning back. Okay, maybe you're one of those people that you can get the wheelie up, you've got the first pedal stroke, but for whatever reason, you always veer to the left or to the right instantaneously. Wheel comes up and you're just every time. This one is probably my favorite. Another YouTuber commented, you know what you need to do? You need to learn how to ride your bike without your hands. Cross them across your chest and try to balance your bike that way. And so I went out for one practice session, 10 minutes, and tried to learn how to balance the bike. This is where I stumbled on steer with your hips. It's also where I figured out if you are veering off, the moment that you wheelie or the moment that your wheel leaves the ground, most likely you have tilted your hips before you engage that pedal stroke, the very first pedal stroke that lifts the wheel off the ground. Be very conscious when you go to give that first pedal stroke that you have leveled your hips. If your hips aren't level, that means the bike is tilted to the left or to the right. I have a hack that I like to use in order to prevent myself from tilting my hips. I like to move my knees out a little bit. I've noticed that when my knees are tucked in, it throws my initial balance off every time. So you're going to make a perfect T with your hips and the bike. And that way, when it comes up, it won't be steering any direction yet. If the bike comes up straight, it's really, really easy to keep it going straight. Focus on your hips being level before the front wheel leaves the ground, and you will have so much more success in your wheelies than before. So there you have it. It is mostly about consistency. And these are all the things that I learned. I'm sure because of your body awareness, your riding skills, you're going to find different things along the path. Give yourself 30 days of 10 minute practice sessions. You are going to unlock your wheelie. Again, these do not have to be consistent days. As I found out, it was one day a week for 10 minutes and I unlocked my wheelie. You can do the same thing too. So happy riding and keep those wheels up. If you like what you saw here in this video, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to live with fitness.